Good afternoon, everyone. It's Friday, the 12th of January, and today we will be discussing an exciting topic in South Asia. So the Bangladeshi elections, the general elections occurred on the 7th of January, and incumbent Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has won another victory, with her Awami League party winning 223 seats out of 300. It was a widely expected outcome, but it has raised concerns about the political future of Bangladesh as Hasina has secured a fourth unprecedented consecutive term, and there is still no clarity on who her successor could be at this point. Um, the elections were violent. There was a lot of protests and incidents in the lead up to the elections and on election day itself. And the elections, the opposition parties basically boycotted the elections because uh, of the fact that they perceived it to be an unfree and unfair election. So, going into this topic, Pratik, can you tell us more about the security situation and how it looks like moving ahead with this government continuing to be in power?
Hello there. Thank you for having me on here. So, as you rightly said, the security environment had steeply deteriorated in the lead up to elections. We had Opposition Bangladesh Nationalist Party, along with other like-minded parties, boycotting elections and also announcing a series of blockades and shutdown strikes. We noticed there were a lot of violence across the country with instances of vandalism, arson, and attacks on opposing candidates throughout the campaigning period. Even the election day was had isolated incidents in different districts with violations of electoral codes, ballot stuffing, and also again attacks, between rival political activists. So going forward, you know, the security environment is still something that is in a state of flux. We'll probably see a gradual uh, improvement. But as of now, all the opposition parties that boycotted elections have stated that they'll continue their protest to restore democracy, quote unquote. And this is likely to result in more disruption, especially the shifting trend where we used to see more protests and violent, you know, gatherings in suburban or say, sorry, you know, rural and semi-urban areas. We're now looking at a shift where we've seen a lot of incidents in Dhaka, where most of the businesses are centered. So this will definitely continue to disrupt normal functioning within the cities with heightened securities, large demonstrations in the coming months. And apart from this, if you're looking at supply chains and logistics with important ports down south in the country, connecting to the capital through highways, we might see that blockades of these highways and uh, you know just attacks along these routes can cause significant issues in terms of logistics.
Right.
We will continue to see some more instances in other areas like Khulna, and we may also uh, see temporary imposition of restrictions and deployment of police as well.
Right. That's quite interesting, Pratik. So it still looks to be a volatile situation. It's interesting that you brought out the demand for democracy. Lately, there has been a lot of Western press on Bangladesh in the run-up to the elections talking about how democracy is regressing in Bangladesh. While these Western values normally come with some sort of economic impact. Raga, do you see any potential economic impact from, the West maybe not investing as much into Bangladesh, or will that continue um, despite, this regression in perceived regression in democracy? And could you just cover off on how the economy looks and what the outlook is, keeping in mind Hasina is continuing her term?
Sure, Uday. So, economically speaking, Bangladesh is facing quite a few challenges. Um, when it comes to the Western opposition to the current elections that have gone on in Bangladesh. We are seeing the US government coming in and saying that it wasn't necessarily free or fair elections that took place. Now, there are serious doubts that the US will levy sanctions against a country like Bangladesh. Let's not forget that this is one of the major government hubs in the world. And, it's inconceivable to think of a possible time where the global supply chains could potentially be affected because a lot of markets in the West from Europe to the US depend on the Bangladeshi uh, garment workers to kind of produce the textiles. So this is not likely to take place, but there have been reports of some constraints that have emerged for exporters, garment exporters particularly, and some US banks have apparently demanded letters of credit. So I see them kind of creating a stringent environment for compliance, and some of these compliance related issues may emerge in the coming months for certain export industries.
Right, that's very
Apart
interesting.
from the business aspect with the West, there are other challenges that Hasina is facing because we are looking at, the garment industry itself going through its internal issues where the minimum wage keeps recurring as a constant issue where workers are holding demonstrations, there's factory closures, and the whole shebang. And Hasina's economic success does also face a pretty bumpy ride with the inflation that's rising. There's a cost of living that has emerged as a concern for the working class, and foreign debt has pretty much doubled since 2016. Some of the recent short-term trends have shown improvements though, but overall, just comparing it to a couple of years ago, foreign reserves have taken quite a bit of a dip. So there are some macroeconomic concerns, while there are short-term improvements in that regard. So these are some of the economic implications.
Great. Okay, thanks for that, Raga. That's very enlightening. So, do you think for businesses that are operating in Bangladesh, there will be a major change at this point, or it will be more of the status quo going on? Especially concerning policies and like Bangladesh trying to get foreign investment in?
Yeah, that's a good question, Uday. So, in terms of business continuity, there have been concerns from some of the foreign observers in the West. However, another fourth consecutive term for a Sheikh Hasina government means that there is some sort of certainty in the midst of all of the chaos and pandemonium that is. There is some certainty of the policies of the government. So while in the short term, there's some skepticism, in the long term, we're again going to see more foreign investments flowing in. And as the protest movements and boycotts start to eventually dwindle, because the peak was really around the elections. As they start to dwindle, we do expect that things will start easing up for businesses as well as foreign investor confidence.
Great. Thanks for that, Raga. I think that ties in a bit to the security environment as you just mentioned. Pratik, if you have any comments on, Sheikh Hasina's and the government's approach to cracking down on the opposition. There's now talk about the opposition becoming irrelevant in Bangladesh. They had boycotted the 2018 elections too, and parties like the BNP did, manage to gather a fair bit of support over the last year, and there was also a low election turnout. But it seems that Sheikh Hasina and the administration have things quite in control in terms of the security environment, in terms of cracking down on the opposition. So do you see the opposition potentially weakening away, or do you see a potential threat in the future, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. As you rightly pointed out, the voter turnout has been the hot topic of discussion when it comes to Bangladesh elections. So the voter turnout was around 40% this time, which is very low even compared to the previous elections in 2018 when it was above 80%. I mean, it's just a surprise that less than half the voting, population that's eligible to vote voted in these elections. And the opposition has been rallying, suggesting this, using the same point, saying this is not legitimate. It's also important to kind of note that just in the run-up to elections and amid all the violence, 8,000 opposition party activists were arrested, and there was a crackdown and raids on political offices across the country, and eventually leading to the boycott, demanding a neutral caretaker government to be in place. But in terms of looking at whether democracy is in danger per se, I do think it's too soon and too premature to make such extreme statements. There is a definite, there is a clear sign of deterioration in the resilience or the strength of the opposition at this point. Uh, but it'll be a hyperbolic statement to say that democracy is never going to be reinstated here. And having said that, I do think the security forces had a very important role to play this time around, especially given this huge peak in violence. And that's likely to be the case in the future, but within the legal limits, I think opposition parties can come back, as we've seen a lot of independent candidates win these elections. Those who stood for elections and win these elections. So in the long run, I do think uh, when elections move towards becoming less violent, I do think the crackdowns by the security forces will also slightly decrease. But that's until we see the next round of elections.
Right. Thanks for that, Pratik. That was quite in-depth and covered on a lot of things that are relevant. So I think we've discussed this topic. Would you have any closing statements on, or Pratik, would you have any closing statements on this? Considering this is a major election in South Asia, and Bangladesh is an important geopolitical actor in the region. It's one of India's few allies, but it also has a fair bit of Chinese investment, and there's a lot of different things going on in Bangladesh that are relevant to, various interests. So any closing statements or points from you guys before we end this interesting discussion?
So in terms of the political developments that have just taken place, Bangladesh has stepped into this particular uncharted territory where we're having successive governance by the same leader, and there's opposition coming in from Western quarters. And looking at just the global geopolitical shifts as well, it is kind of caught in the middle of, a sort of a US versus an anti-US coalition of sorts. And there is some sort of softening towards China, softening towards its neighbor India. So we are going to see some political shifts as well, just looking at, the global trends that have occurred over the last couple of years, and these elections will certainly also pave a path for the trends that are coming up ahead.
Right. Thanks a lot, Raga. Pratik, any last words?
Yeah, just as we see the geopolitical implications here, we also have some domestic developments that will shape how the security environment will progress and how that will look for business continuity, especially in Dhaka and other important commercial centers. I think it's very important to know that, I mean, very important to understand that Sheikh Hasina's success as a prime minister has been largely on the economic progress that Bangladesh made in the past few years. But at the same time, there have been criticisms about the handling of COVID and the recent energy price spikes that affected Bangladesh significantly, which had a domino effect impacting different industries. in the export sector, especially the ready-made garments and so on. So looking at it, I think there are a lot of challenges ahead for Sheikh Hasina in terms of stabilizing the economy and taking it forward. And that will have a direct impact on the security environment, attracting investments and balancing it uh, with, you know, progress and driving all those challenges is going to be something that we'll have to monitor and see how that pans out.
Right. Yeah. Thanks a lot for that, Pratik. And with that, appreciate everyone listening to this audio. We're joined by Raga, who heads the information team, and Pratik, who's a senior analyst at APAC. And we'll continue briefing clients and those interested on similar situations or topical subjects that are relevant to businesses across APAC and Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So thanks a lot for joining us today, and thanks again, Raga and Pratik, for your time.